Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my final part of my Naxxramas Resto Shaman healing guide overview, whatever you want to call it. Today we have the final two bosses, which is Saffhiron and Kel'Thuzad. And Saffhiron is probably one of the hardest fights in Classic WoW. Not even necessarily because of the mechanics, but just overall. We are going to need Frost Res gear. Stick around to the end of the video, and I'll have a little bonus section that I should have honestly just included in my gearing guide for Nax, but I didn't because I just forgot, to be quite honest, about a Frost Res set. And what kind of gear you can put in where, what are the best pieces, and how do you sacrifice plus healing and mana for Frost Res, but not at too much cost, things like that. So if you're curious about that gear discussion, I'll put that at the end of this video if you want to stick around and check that out. So this video format's going to be a little different because I actually have footage of me on the Blizzard PTR testing these myself from my, I streamed them on my Twitch when they got tested. So I'm just going to show you the VOD instead of breaking down the overall layout and stuff. Show you some pointers, things like that. My general experience with the fight, everything like that. I will kind of just review that. Before anything else, we'll go over a basic overview of the fight and everything like that. As we go, I'll explain the mechanics, things like that, explain what happened. So let's go ahead and let's just get started here. So we have us getting ready to pull. This is 1.5 times speed that is here on my VOD here, so we can see this is after we've already wiped. So the setup's a little different. You can see me having to replace my totems and everything. This is a very chain heal heavy fight. I go and pop my Scarab Brooch right off the bat, replace my totems. Talk says he needs them, so I replace my totems for him right there. You're going to split the raid in 2 halves, so you see only half the raid is light up in range of me, and then the other half, so depending on which side you're on, Saph will go into the air, and here is where the air phase begins. Now here I get frozen. There are 5 people that will get frozen. On the 5th one, Saph will do a big AoE explosion, and at that point everyone is basically going to die that isn't behind an ice block. Now, and I'll go ahead and just rewind this a little bit. So at this point in the air phase, we'll go ahead and we'll put it at normal speed here. So in this air phase, what's important is to pop a GFPP. That's a greater frost protection, not a fire protection, for this air phase, because you take the ticking damage. You see the additional ticking damage that you take in the ice block, and people cannot heal you in the ice block. So you need to be ready to heal those people when they come out. You see me just cast some lesser healing waves on myself when I come out. That's going to be the most important thing. The other thing is, like I mentioned before, the ice cubes that go out in the air phase. So when those go out, then you're going to have a window of time where everyone's going to spread out. You don't want to be close to anybody or anything like that. You want to be spread out loosely during the air phase. You see everyone spreads out. And I'm the first one to get ice blocked, I believe, or the second one, as there's another one over on that side. So this is also why you split. That way, generally, the ice blocks always split in the halves of the raid, because if they're all on one side of the raid, people aren't going to make it and people are going to die. So that's the main thing. There's just a ton of damage going out on this fight constantly with the ticking frost damage. And you may want to pre-pop a greater frost protection on this fight, but it goes away so quickly that unless you have an abundance of gold or an extra amount of consumes, it's not necessarily worth it. But one mistake that I did make in these PTR fights is that I didn't wait until the air phase to pop another greater frost. So you won't see me do that in this VOD, but that's what you should do. I would pop one preemptively, and then once the other one ran out, I would immediately pop another one. I would not recommend doing that. I would save your second for the air phase, because in case you get frozen, that might be the difference between you living or not. And there's just a ton of ticking frost damage. So you can see sometimes the ticks are like 150, sometimes they're 300, sometimes they're 450. That's just the nature of the frost resist. So on this PTR, it's a little different because they gave us a buff. They gave us a buff of 200 frost res, but we also had a buff of 50% increased healing. So the healing numbers here are way higher than you would normally see. And because of that, Healing Stream Totem scaled very well. Now, I do think Healing Stream Totem will be worth using on the final version. It won't scale quite as well, but I think it did about 15k healing for me over the course of this fight, which is a lot of extra healing that required no mana, right? And you can snapshot it with an Amplify Magic or something like that. Amplify Magic for your mages should be used on this fight max rank, because it doesn't actually cause you to take more damage from the AoE. It only increases the healing done. So everyone should be amp magic, so that helps. As far as everything else, I mean, that's that's pretty much it as far as the mechanics. It's just just everyone's taking constant ticking damage, and you see we kill it there. So that was our killing attempt, but we probably spent a good hour and a half or so wiping on this boss. And I'll just keep playing it through as I'm talking about it, so you guys have a good idea of what the fight looks like, everything like that. This is a fight that is going to require frost res, because basically every single healer, other than the tank healers for the most part, every single healer in our raid that we did this on, their most healed target was themselves. So this is why it's important for everyone in the raid, because we had that 200 frost res buff, to have frost res, because without that, I believe it ticks for about 600 damage, I believe. With frost res, it's going to tick anywhere from, as you see, like 150, 300, sometimes 450. That's just the nature of frost res. Sometimes you're going to resist extra damage, sometimes you're not. So that's kind of the scale of things. But most of the time with like high frost res, like we're aiming for 100 frost res for our healers plus totem. That's 160 bare minimum that we're going to have in the shaman groups. So 150 for melee, 100 for healers. I'd say that's a pretty good mark to aim for. It sounds like a lot, but honestly it's not. And that's unbuffed, and that's without totem. With buffs and totem, you're looking at close to 200. Especially if you use Juju Chill, that's additional. You could use the Basilisk Spine item as well. And you can easily get to that 200 marker with totem, because we weren't using totem for most of this fight. This attempt we were, and it put us at 260 with the buff. So that's something to keep in mind here. And obviously with the 50% healing buff and us not having to sacrifice gear slots for frost res, that makes this fight a lot different on live. It will be a lot different on live because of that, and that's something to consider. Like I said, at the end of this video, I'll kind of break down a frost res set and everything like that. If you're curious what mine is, what other shaman in my guild have, things like that. But it's definitely needed for this fight, for sure. It's just going to make you survive more. It's going to make everything easier for the raid overall, because you're constantly taking damage. And on the PTR here, it was about every second to second and a half it would tick. They did say they are going to change it from this and do, I believe, every 2 seconds, which is more authentic to what it did in 112. But it's still not going to be that much different. It's maybe like half a second difference. And again, with 200 frost res built in and all our normal healing gear and 50% plus healing, it was still just so hard to heal. So I still think that this fight is definitely the most healing intensive and healing dependent fight in the raid. And it's just going to be one of those fights that we need to be aware of our role and keeping ourselves alive, because if we can keep ourselves alive and our mana at a good level, we will kill the boss as a raid. It's going to be a long fight week 1 as well, because the DPS also had a buff on this. They didn't have any FR gear or anything. They just had their normal gear. And week 1, everyone's going to have FR gear. They're not going to have, you know, probably world buffs at this point. So it's going to be a really long fight. And without something like Mana Spring, I would honestly go Mana Tide. You know, week 1, I would encourage just about every shaman other than like a Totem Twister in the tank group or something to go deep resto specifically for this fight, if nothing else. Bring your Dark Runes, bring plenty of major manas, because it's probably going to be like a Twin Emps length fight, if I had to guess, week 1, just because of all the Frost Res gear and stuff that people are wearing. It's just not going to make it any easier on anybody. So that's the overview of Saph. It's not too mechanically difficult, but the biggest challenge is going to be spreading out in the air phase, hiding behind the ice blocks when it's time, knowing the time of that, and then when that 5th one goes out, right before that, when the 4th one goes down, that's when you want to get behind an ice block. Because if you wait till the 5th one, you're going to be dead. So don't wait till the 5th one, wait for the 4th one in the air, the 4th ice block. Then the big explosion will go out. We'll go ahead and look at the air phase one more time here. So you could just get a general glimpse of it and everything. And how everyone's positioned, how many ice blocks go out. And then when everyone prepares, you know, I kind of replace my totems for the next phase, just preemptively speaking there. Everyone gets behind these. And that's pretty much it. So not too mechanically intensive, but it's just such a healing intense fight that I would definitely go into it with a lot of FR, at least probably 100 and a decent amount of plus healing as well. You can strike the balance, like I said. I'll review that at the end. And that is pretty much it. So basic tips I'm just going to review real quick. I know I've kind of rambled on here, but to summarize for us, I would recommend using Healing Stream on this fight, just because it won't scale quite as good as it did on the PTR because of the buff, but there's constant ticking damage in the raid, so it's going to help you heal more for no additional mana, right? Like, you're not actively burning mana, and it's just doing passive healing. And with Amp Magic, and if you pop like a trinket or something, like Zandalion Hero Charm, for example, it will snapshot the healing of that trinket and heal for more during that entire totem duration. So just like Diamond Flask, you can snapshot it and it'll heal for more. So this is one of those fights that I would recommend Healing Stream on, as well as Lotheb, as I mentioned in my other video. Those are probably the main 2 fights that I would use Healing Stream for. Obviously, Frost Res Totem, just make sure your totems are in range. Don't get tail swiped by the boss. You can see my positioning throughout the fight is mostly the same. I'm in Ztox's group, so that's the main tank perspective. Everywhere else, the boss has a big hitbox and a big range, so anywhere else the totems, you can pretty much just place them right in the middle, and you will be good. So that is Saph. Definitely a very intense fight. Took a while for us to get into the groove of it, but once you get it down, you get some synergy. Everyone knows what to do, and you're rocking enough Frost Res. It's not a mechanically intensive fight. It's actually very simple from a mechanic standpoint. So that is Saffron. The other thing I guess I forgot to mention is there's a blizzard that periodically happens when he's on the ground phase. And it's just like Twin Emps, just don't stand in it. It does move, so it is a little bit different. It does move a little bit around the room in melee range. So just stay back a little bit from the melee once your totems are placed, and you should avoid that pretty easily. And that's it. That's Saffron. We'll go ahead and we'll move on to Kel'Thuzad. Alrighty, guys. So we're going to go ahead and take a look here at our Kel'Thuzad kill on the PTR. Now, despite what some people may think about Kel'Thuzad, this is actually a pretty easy fight. It was very underwhelming. This was like half a pug for us on the PTR for my guild, and we We would have one-shot it. We wiped twice just to practice mechanics and things like that. But this was a very underwhelming fight. Saph was very hard, lived up to the expectations. Kel'Thuzad, on the other hand, not as much. So phase 1, everyone's going to sit in this circle, and you're just going to, the ranged are going to kill the ads. And it's just a timed thing. So it's just they're going to kill the mobs when they come out. If the skeletons get too close, they kind of blow up in melee. But they don't actually do too much damage individually. Only when you have a bunch come in are they really going to do anything super significant. So this is kind of like Razor Gore. As you see, someone says, where's Razor Gore in the middle? Because it is basically like Razor Gore phase 1 or something like that. Very, very simple. Not a lot to it. We kind of just stand there. I would conserve most of your mana because other than the tanks, like with some of the abominations, not many people are going to take much damage unless those skeletons end up getting to the middle and blowing up the raid. But even if you get like 1 or 2 to come through, they really actually don't do that much damage on the raid as a whole if they do get through. So that's something to keep in mind. And just that's phase 1. I mean, it's very simple, and I'll just talk over it while it plays here so you see the whole fight. And then phase 2 is just like, Razor Gore, or a fight like that where, Kel'Thuzad will become tankable. He actually like burns relatively quickly. And he only really has like a few mechanics that you really need to worry about as a healer. And for the most part, you're just going to keep your totems always in the middle of the room, even in the second phase, just because the melee are basically going to be there the entire fight. So you don't really need to replace your totems or anything like that. As far as the second phase, really what happens in the second phase is just Kel'Thuzad will become tankable. Like I said, he'll more or less be tanked in the middle of the room where you're doing the first phase. And then from there, he pretty much just does a few abilities. Some of like the ads that are like Crypt Lords or whatever they're called in WoW. They look like a Nubricon basically. They'll come out. They can be shackled, they can be slowed, they can be CC'd in any way as undead units. So they're pretty easy to avoid there. They do hurt if they hit you, but they are CCable and killable without too much effort, really. So they're not too big of a deal. There's an MC that goes out on a random target, just like the Banshee in Stratholme. A fight like that where somebody will just get MC'd, you just CC him or like scare him or whatever, right? You just CC him, you can sheep him, whatever. And then when the MC fades, you just, get the poly off or whatever it is. And that's honestly really it. There's another mechanic that he does where he puts like a dark circle on the ground, just like 4 horsemen. One of the 4 horsemen will do that. Just don't stand in it. It's literally that simple. It's just a big black circle to be placed on a random player. Just don't stand in it. That's it. And that's pretty much it for Kel'Thuzad. Like, there's really not a lot there to it. It's not a very stressful fight. Down the stretch near like execute range, things will start to pick up. The ads will start to break out of CC, and other things like that. The MCs will be, a little crazy, but it's nothing that isn't manageable. And we'll go ahead, and the first phase is about to end here. When you're about to transition, because all the ads around the outside will disappear, and you'll only have the ones that are left up. So you guys will be able to see Kel'Thuzad becomes tankable. Zetox will tank him. And I kind of just go on the outside. You want to spread out during this phase. That way you don't, clappuccino somebody when you get MC'd or when the shadow goes out or anything else. So you see Zetox gets MC'd. He just gets sheeped. All of them gets sheeped. There is a frostbolt volley that goes out. It doesn't hit too hard. Most of the time it should be pummeled by melee like continuously, so it actually shouldn't really even go out in the first place. That's the animation right there, that little red like swirling circle. That's the animation for the death spot that you shouldn't stand in. So it's not the same animation. You see how the melee move out of that, and you have like a few seconds before it explodes in a matter of sense. So it's not the most obvious animation in the world. It's not as obvious as the Four Horsemen, but it's still like, okay, yeah, I definitely shouldn't stand in that, right? The melee will get frozen, and you just need to heal them up. You can heal them, unlike the icebox in Saph. So you actually can heal them, and it hits them for a lot every second. You see several of them just died like very quickly. So that's something that you need to prepare for. When the melee get frozen, you can heal them, unlike Saffhiron. So, and they will take a ton of damage. So you do need to be wary of that. Again, this is very much a chain heal cleave healing fight. And you can just see how fast Kel'Thuzad is dying. This is sped up a little bit. It's like 1.25 speed on my Twitch VOD, something like that. So it's not sped up too much, but just enough to make it not go too slow. You see the ads coming out, the guardians, and they just get shackled by the priests. They kind of just sit there and chill out. And you don't really even like attack them or anything. They kind of just sit there till the boss is dead, and that's pretty much it. Another frostbolt volley, and that's it. Like, we don't really even lose that many people. Like, Zetox is our main tank. He died, and we don't even like skip a beat on it. You know, we just kind of do it. So Kel'Thuzad, pretty underwhelming fight overall. It's not very complicated, and it's very, very simple. And you know, if you do Saffron and get here, it's not anywhere near as intensive as that, because everyone actually wears their actual gear instead of frost res, right? So that is Naxxramas in a nutshell, basically. So yeah, Kel'Thuzad, not too difficult. Saffron is actually pretty difficult. I'd say probably the second hardest boss in Nax, behind probably just Four Horsemen, honestly, and that's more of a mechanics thing, whereas Saffron is a just like healing intensity, managing yourself kind of fight. So they're opposite fights in terms of the way they operate, but in terms of how difficult I would consider them, they're right there with each other. Or I could just be wrong, and Saph with the changes could just be a joke, but I don't think it will be, just given the buffs that we had on the PTR and everything like that. I think Saph's going to be really healing intensive, very stressful. So that's it for the guide portion. Like I said, at the end, I want to cover a little bit of fun stuff for you guys, gearing, everything else like that. So what I have here is my week 1 gear set for Saffron. Now yours can be a lot different depending on what gear you have. Obviously I have like T2.5, I have the Fang from the Scareboard quest chain, stuff like that. So depending like your weapons or whatever, maybe a little different stat wise, but generally this is a pretty good set. The other thing I forgot to mention is that maybe a little bit of shadow res as well is nice on Saffron, because there is a curse that goes out that does shadow damage. We really shouldn't have to worry about it as healers, because if it's not decursed by the mages, then they're doing something wrong, and that person's probably going to die anyway, because it does like 2k per tick, I think. So I didn't really bring it up because it didn't seem super relevant for us specifically, because there's not much we can do about it, because it's not even supposed to tick, right? So, but it is worth mentioning. So 53 shadow res, some frost res, obviously 102 on this set. And the general balance of this set I really like, that I found with my gear, and I'll kind of go over some different options depending on what you have as well in your set. So starting off, T2 helmet, if you don't have it, I would highly recommend getting it. I know Ani's a little scuffed to do nowadays, but it's pretty much the best helmet for Saph, just because it has good stats and it has frost and shadow res on it, so it's really, really good. There is a new enchant that is Ice Guard that comes out on Tuesday that gives the 10 frost resist. You have to turn in like some scourge stones and stuff. There's a big long quest chain for it. I'll leave a link to how to get Frostguard in, it's either Frostguard or Iceguard, whichever it's called. Either way, I'll leave a link to it in the description so you guys can check it out on how to get it. But it's not too terribly complicated, and that'll help with your frost resist set, because the more actual healing pieces you can use, obviously the better. And we're in a better position than melee or something, whereas in my raid, I think our melee are required to get 150 frost res. We're required to get about 100, 90 to 100, and it just affects us a lot less than it does like the melee. And like I said, this is going to be a really long fight and everything, so it's something to keep in mind on, you know, how much MP5, things like that. You still want a decent amount of mana, but you want to make it easier on yourself and get as much frost res as possible. So going down the line here, I have Jendo's Evil Eye. Obviously, best for this would be Fallen God. I'm not going to have that personally. At this point, I don't have it, but yeah, so I'm rocking with Jindo's. Plus, I like kind of int for Saph, because it is going to be like a longer fight. So the more int you have, the better, in my opinion. And MP5. Wild Growth, just because of the raw healing. Sacrificing T2.5, because there's really no way that you can get T2.5 and really have a ton of frost res. There are, but honestly, this is one of those fights where I wouldn't want to really have T2.5, and the reason for that is you're going to burn through your mana quicker. You may do more healing, but I think week 1, week 2, when you're progressing through Saph for the first time, I think it's better to play the long game than the I'm going to parse game, right? So personally, I feel like it's smarter to just sacrifice the T2.5, go with some stronger healing pieces, and stick with that frost res. So then we have Saffron Drape, which is funny that it's named Saffron Drape, because this is also a bis item for Saffron. So frost resist, and you also get like a lot of int, and you still retain a little bit of spell power. So this is definitely a bis cloak as well for Saffron. And then I just have T2.5 chest piece, because the stats are pretty good on it overall. You could really do just about any chest piece here, but I just went with T2.5. I originally had Ice Mail Jerkin, which is a 10 frost resist mail chest piece, so that is an option in this slot if you are struggling to get to the number. I do have that in my bank, and I was originally using that, but with Frostguard and everything else, I reached my requirements for 100, so I actually get to sub in a real piece of gear instead, which is really nice. Or if you just want to go for pure raw healing, something like Robe of the Exalted or something like that, or if you have the robe that's even better from AQ 40, then that's also a really good option for you. Loomguard arm braces, or the ones from like AQ, like, you know, just raw plus healing bracers are really good here. Obviously I have the Fang. This is the best shield I would recommend for this. It's a decently long quest chain in Plaguelands, and it requires you to do Skolo and everything else. I believe Strata as well. But it's not too terribly long, and people have been doing that kind of content for rep and everything, right? And I feel like people even continue to do that, even when Naxx is out and stuff. So this is a really good 10 frost resistant shield. Now another shield that's really, really good for Saffron, if you can't get this shield, is, I don't know why my thing's like bugging. Okay, there we go. Is Jagged Obsidian Shield, which is 5 alt resistances, and then you can also put 8 frost resist to shield on that. So, and this is like a really cheap crafted item. So this is a really good option in case you know, it's kind of last second when this video is coming out, so you may not have a lot of time to really do that quest chain and prepare that way. So this is a good alternative for sure. Then we have the Gauntlets of 10 Storms, and I go with the 3-set bonus for the extra chain heal. That's a really good way to kind of make up for the T2.5, and to me, this is a more valuable thing to go for with a Saffron Frost Res set than T2.5 personally, because I think you're doing more healing when you are healing, but you're not going to go as fast with the faster casts. So I personally, this is what I would recommend for Saffron. You can see there, belt, gloves, and then I have Radiant leggings, just because all the Radiant armor can be crafted by blacksmiths, I believe, and it's really, really good, and it's just, you know, raw like Frost and Shadow res, which for this fight is really good, but especially the Frost res with the Ice Guard enchant on it. It's just, you know, I mean, that's a 28, so that's like 1/4 of the requirement just in one piece right there. So really valuable. And then just the Stormcaller foot guards. I thought about using my rank 12 boots as well, or something like that. I don't really have good healing boots. Like, I don't have the trash boots from BWL or anything like that. So these are kind of the best like healing boots I have. So, but depending on what you have in that slot, you can pretty much use whatever. Band of Icy Depths. This is from the Scarab Lord quest chain, so you may not necessarily have access to this. You can buy like green rings. They are kind of pricey with frost resist on them, but they're still worth it, right? I've seen people rock with 2 rings and double ice reflectors and stuff. I kind of have a nice balance with my set. Not only I like the stats, like almost 700 plus healing, not that much MP5, but that's okay, like a decent amount of mana when you consider like buffs and everything. So, you know, I'm rocking with 1 regular ring and then Rejuve gem for my trinket. So if you don't have Rejuve, then, you know, maybe Scarab Brooch or something like that, which is another thing that I forgot to bring up in my gearing video. And look, you don't have to dislike the video to tell me that I forgot about Scarab Brooch, okay? Obviously, like, okay, I forgot 1 item. I'm sorry. Don't just spam dislike the video because I forgot 1 item, okay? Like, okay, anyway, my rant aside, let's continue. So, just like a frost resist ring, something like that, this is a really good one if you do have it. And part of the Scarab Lord chain, if you've started it, this one isn't particularly hard to get. This is one of the easier shards to get in the quest chain, and you get this really good item. And it's really good for PvP too. So Ring of the Martyrs, what I'm rocking, just because the MP5. If I have an Elementium, I would probably use that over this. The MP5 is really good for Ring of the Martyr, but I feel like, I don't know, like I'm kind of torn between the balance of MP5 and Int, because this ring doesn't have Int, but it has MP5. So it's like a delicate balance to strike in this, but MP5 is really important on Saph. So this is a really good ring to rock with for sure. Then 1 Ice Reflector. I think just about everyone and their mother, at least that is using engineering, is using one of these. It's really, really good. The other one you can use is like the final rank of the AV trinket. I believe it has 10 frost res as well. So you can like combine these, or you can make double ice reflector for 5 more if you want, to get, you know, 20 to 25 frost resistance out of your trinkets, 15 if you're crafting double ice reflectors. So that's something. But Rejuve is definitely, I mean, it's just amazing. If you have it, like, I wouldn't sacrifice it for Saph at all. Even if you're a little bit shorter on frost resist than like you maybe should be, just don't get rid of Rejuve. I mean, I probably don't have to tell you that, but I've seen some people that like have Rejuve and they're like, oh, I'm not going to use it because I need the frost res. Like, bro, use it. It is your best friend on this fight, 110%. So that's my general, that's going to be like my week 1 set. And obviously there's things that you can substitute in here depending on your trinkets, things like that. But I wanted to give you guys a basic overview of the stats of this one, everything like that, just so you can get a good picture of what my set looks like, what your set could potentially look like. And again, you could actually make it so that you have T2.5 5 set with the necessary frost res, but personally I wouldn't recommend it. But there's a lot of different ways that you can optimize your set, and in all reality, you're probably only going to need a set like this for 1 or 2 weeks, and then it's going to be either too easy that you won't need it, or you're just going to get one of the frost resist piece from Naxx that has like 40 frost res on it, and then that's just going to take care of, like, you know, a ton of your pieces, right? So it's just something to keep in mind for Saph for week 1. But anyway, that pretty much closes up everything. If you guys have any more questions on Naxx or anything, I'll probably release some other videos once Naxx is actually out and I've done the fights myself. I'll maybe do like a healing guide that's a little bit different over the course of Naxx, whereas it's less of like a boss guide, I guess. Some kind of format like that. I'll probably do one for AQ as well if you guys want. I'd do one for every raid tier if you guys really want, but I don't know how necessary it really is. So yeah, that's pretty much everything, guys. And I'm going to be releasing some PvP videos as well. LA Shaman in Phase 6 gearing, stuff like that. So keep an eye out for that. Maybe some Shadowlands content. I've been really busy with Shadowlands, so let me know what you guys think about that. I play Enhancement and Resto in Shadowlands, so let me know what you guys think about that. Maybe some discussion videos on Retail and Classic. I'm down to do whatever you guys want. So thank you guys so much for the support. Really appreciate it, and good luck in Naxx, everybody. Appreciate y'all, love y'all, and I will see you guys next time.